Hi everyone, I'm Anna. I'm just going to have some water. So I'm an artist and I've been doing a residency here for the last 6 weeks and I've got another 2 weeks to go. I'm from Perth, so it's been really nice to come here and spend 2 months coming in Monday to Friday and just making and not having to go to work. It's been amazing. So I work with embroidery and I work with tattoo, and I'll show both of those things later. But really I think my practice is a lot, it's all different expanded drawing. So I don't think there's any actual drawing in this presentation, but that's kind of how I see all the things that I do is just being different ways of mark making, I guess, on different surfaces. And surface is a lot of what it's about. My work is also a lot about language. I kind of got into art by accident. I was always going to be a writer. I always wrote throughout high school, and then I got into art while I was sick and I couldn't really write. And then I did a year at art school just for fun, and then I ended up staying. I studied writing as well later, and that comes into my practice quite a lot. So just a bit of background there. These are from, the first lot of images are from an exhibition I had last year called Skin Envelope, which was about the edges of the body and the boundaries of the body. So a skin envelope is a way of viewing the body where the skin, essentially where the skin is the envelope, but it is as opposed to earlier sort of medieval views of the body, which is the body is this porous thing that you cannot control and that takes in, toxic air that makes you sick, and that is more like a sponge or a net rather than something contained. So I was really interested in ideas of containment and also the different ways that the body has been viewed. And these are some of the objects that I made for this exhibition. That's gouache on linen. The mark making, and I haven't shown anything earlier than like 2015, but the mark making and the draw is all from the kinds of drawings that I was doing on paper, and then that became embroideries when I started doing embroidery, just for something I was saying earlier, something to do on the bus, and then became part of my art practice. So I guess the shape, they're abstractions and they're just mark making, and they're also in some ways a replacement for language and words. These are stoneware using underglazed pencils and glazes, and then on an unglazed stoneware shelf. A few of these objects are also on the table where my work is, and you're welcome to touch them. I made a stoneware frame for this piece. I made a series of these. So it was a strip that I like extruded. So when you push the clay through a thin hole, so I made like a flat strap, and then pierced holes, made it into a circle and fired it. And then it was stitched, then the embroidery was stitched into it. Oh yeah, those are some drawings. I'm not sure how visible this piece is, but I might read it because it leads into the next thing, if that's all right. So this is called Smoke and Water. It's written, I don't know how clear it is, it's written on a wall in the studio that I was doing a residency in at the time at the Perth Institute of Contemporary Arts, and the words are they're done in dots. I was using a lot of tattoo at the time, and stick and poke, which is by hand, and it's all in a series of dots. So it's anyway. The things I tattooed on you are gone now. Every black pinprick that plotted your edges held you on course for a while. We used to mark each other like sailors dreaming of land, dreaming of something to hold on to. You slipped away at night. The last vessel you travelled in was made of wood. There was only room for one, and I couldn't follow. These marks, like us, they're made of smoke and water. They surge and recede. They'll float in our skins for only so long. So that piece I made at the same time as I was making all the work for Skin Envelope. And it was in the show in the form of like a fold-out poster that people could take home and put on their own walls if they wanted to. I don't know if anyone did. At the same time that I started doing embroidery, I started doing tattoo. I was really interested in stick and poke tattoo, which is tattoo without a machine, using tattoo needles, or sometimes using other needles that are not tattoo needles, and using tattoo ink, or sometimes other ink that is not tattoo ink. I use tattoo needles and tattoo ink now, but I didn't when I started. So I got really interested in these DIY tattoos. There are a lot of, I looked at pictures online, and I looked at Russian criminal tattoos, prison tattoos, and different ways that people have of marking the body traditionally in cultures across the world. I discovered Ötzi the Iceman, who is an amazing frozen corpse from the Copper Age, which is about 5,000 years ago, and he was discovered in the, sorry if my dates are wrong, it's about that. So he's older than Stonehenge anyway. So he was discovered in the Alps, and he's got about 50 tattoos over his body. He was obviously preserved in the cold. So it's this really old practice that people have been doing for such a long time, for so many different reasons. The tattoos on Ötzi were on points where he would have had arthritis or inflammation, scientists discovered, so it's possible that they were either healing tattoos, or they were marks for where some kind of acupuncture could have taken place, or there could have been many different reasons for that, but I don't know, I find that really interesting. So anyway, I got really into tattoo, and my friend Kate Anna and I were both, we sort of started tattooing each other, tattooing ourselves, tattooing each other, which was really interesting, and it's this very like friendship bonding kind of experience. And at the beginning of last year, she died from cancer, and that was a few months before I made this work. And I was thinking about the fact that I'd tattooed these things on her, like over a period of time. And tattoos are these like permanent things. And you know, when I got my first tattoo, my mum was like, "Well, you've got that forever now," and was very disapproving. And they're seen as this permanent thing, but they only last as long as the body. And those tattoos are gone now. And they're this permanent impermanence. They sit just under the skin. And I was very interested in that. So after doing a lot of very random tattoos on different people of just things they wanted, like a pig in a hat or, you know, whatever, I started making tattoos that were more like my drawings and embroideries, using coloured tattoo inks. And these are some of them. And that's an ongoing project. I've done about 30 now. This is just a few. It's quite hard to document tattoos well, because when you first do them, they look really red and like terrible. And you have to wait like a week for them to settle down and then organise to take photos. And anyway, so I haven't got good photos of all of them, but yeah, I did quite a lot when during the exhibition Skin Envelope last year in the gallery. I did 2 a day while I was sitting the space, and people came in, and we so these last 2 were ones that I did in the space, although this one I added to later. People would come in, and I would set out the inks, and we would talk about, they would choose colours, and then I would do some drawings, and then I would kind of draw it onto their skin with a needle, and then I would tattoo it on. And so it's this very collaborative process. This one, this larger blue kind of shape here was what I tattooed on this person in the gallery. And then later she came back and said she wanted me to tattoo the rest of her arm. And I really liked doing this one because it's one of my favourites, partly because I really enjoyed like the scattered, delicate marks of it, which I hadn't really done before, but also because she had these old scars, these circular scars on her arm, and the reason she wanted me to tattoo her was as a kind of healing of her arm, and yeah, that felt really meaningful. This is one I did recently, and that's some of the drawings. That's on Adrienne. You can ask her about it later. We didn't do it here for health and safety reasons. So I did all these drawings and we chose one, and that's what it ended up being. How am I going for time? Like 2 minutes? 1 minute? Nothing?
Yeah, another few minutes.
Oh, great. I've become really interested recently in the ritual and the ceremony of, well, lots of different kinds of rituals and ceremonies, but the intimate ritual of tattooing somebody. It's very quiet because there's no machine, it's just needles and inks and conversation and being very close to each other's bodies for however long it takes to do the tattoo, which could be a couple of hours, because stick and poke is very slow. It's just lots and lots of tiny, tiny dots. And I've realised recently that the ceremonies, are like religious ceremonies, are very much have very much informed my work without me really thinking about it. My dad is an Anglican minister, and I grew up going to church every Sunday, and then I stopped going to church and had nothing to do with it. And that's something that I'm now realising probably had a lot more influence than I'm giving it, space for. So, yeah, and I was interested in tattoos as a kind of ritual, both as a religious ritual and also as an identity ritual, and exploring tattoos in relation to queerness, which is the reason I stopped going to church, is something that I've just really started looking at. And how all these things fit together as different parts of my own identity and ways of understanding the world. So this installation, the banner here is hanging over there. This is an installation from an exhibition called Passing/Parades, which was about queer visibility or invisibility, whether you're passing or whether you're holding parades. Passing is straight, yeah. There were lots of different artists involved. It was curated by Kate Britton, who's from Sydney, but it was in a space in Fremantle, which is like the basement of an old Maya building. The space is called Success, and it's just run for 1 year this year. And so it's this enormous, dark space. They took out all the lights, basically because they couldn't afford to run it with the lights. So it's this amazing space for projection and for these kind of pockets of light and then vast dimness, and it was a really beautiful space to have that show. So I made this embroidery, which you can't see there, but has these little piles of stones. I was really interested in these, in little collections, little piles of things brought from other places. Kate asked me to be part of the show because she was interested in my tattoo work, and I'd never thought of it in terms of queerness before, and that was really where that started. And she said if I wanted to, I could tattoo her as part of the show. I was like, all right, that sounds good. And then I thought that it would take us a really long time to come to an agreement of what I would tattoo on her, but I sent her a picture of this embroidery with the pile of stones, and she sent me back a photo of a pile of stones in her bedroom, and I was like, well, that's secretly what I wanted to tattoo on you, but anyway, I'm glad that we've come to this agreement. So that's the tattoo. This is a text about collecting and layers and piles and taking things apart and putting them together and rearranging them. In terms of stories and narratives and ways of understanding the world, religion, queerness, feminism, the ways that I understand the world now. as opposed to the stories from my childhood, which still very much are, you can't get rid of those things. They're always still there. And these, I should have played a video, but I didn't. So these are some stills from the video that was part of the installation of the performance, of which I did at the opening event when I tattooed Kate. So that's the process of tattooing and then wiping it clean. I really like the wounding and caring kind of dichotomy of the process. Small deliberate wounding and then cleansing and wrapping and looking after it. This is what I've been working on currently, and kind of continuing that project and looking at religion. And I'm not sure if there's any more slides, but I'm going to read you quickly this quote that I've been thinking about a lot, which I should have put in the PowerPoint, but I didn't. So here it is. It's from the Russian Criminal. It's from an essay in the Russian Criminal Tattoo Encyclopedia, which is a collection of documentation of tattoos on the bodies of Russian criminals, as the name would suggest, like contemporary people who, or from the last kind of 30 years, I guess, mostly self-done, often very elaborate, and often quite religious, or about murder, one or the other. When the self-contained space of the body is entirely covered with magic inscriptions, its status changes fundamentally. It is transformed into a site for the performance of ritual enactments. Such tattoos are regarded as a source of power that force the world beyond to react to the object with which it comes in contact. So I really liked that idea about tattoos being perhaps an expression of the self, but also perhaps an expression of almost like a prayer or a decree of something that should happen, and that by existing they push things to happen. And I'm not sure where I'm going with that, but I'm really drawn to that quote. So I've been this is a drawing that I'm turning into a large-scale banner, which is in progress over on my table. That's obviously the end. And that's going to be in a small exhibition in about a week and a couple of days. So I better get cracking. Cool. That's all. Thank you very much.